In a dramatic turn of events, Malaysia has firmly opposed the Philippines' request to a United Nations body, which seeks formal recognition of its extensive undersea continental shelf. Malaysia argues that this claim encroaches on the territory from the baselines of Sabah, a Malaysian state. On June 27, Malaysia's permanent mission to the United Nations delivered a strong note verbale to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, clearly stating that Malaysia has never recognized the Philippines' claim to Sabah. This move comes after China had already expressed its objections to the Philippines' claims. In an earlier note verbale dated June 18, addressed to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, China's permanent mission to the UN urged the Commission to dismiss the Philippines' submission. The Chinese government firmly requested that the Commission not even consider the Philippines' claims. Further amplifying the tension, Malaysia has requested the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf to disregard and not qualify the Philippines' partial submission. The Malaysian government has categorically rejected the Philippines' submission, asserting that the claimed continental margin of the Republic of the Philippines stems from the baselines of Sabah, Malaysia. This blatantly disregards Malaysia's undeniable sovereignty over Sabah, stated the Malaysian mission. Malaysia insists that Sabah has always been an inseparable part of the country, a fact recognized by the UN and the global community since the Federation of Malaysia was established on September 16, 1963. Malaysia argues that the Philippines' claim to Sabah contradicts its international obligation to respect and support the right to self-determination exercised by the people of Sabah in 1963. The government of Malaysia completely rejects the Philippines' assertions of legal ownership and sovereignty over the Malaysian state of Sabah, the mission declared. They emphasized that the Philippines' claim to Sabah holds no weight under international law. The long-standing territorial dispute over Sabah traces its roots back to an 1878 agreement between the Sultan of Sulu and the North Borneo Chartered Company. This historical context adds layers of complexity to the modern conflict, with the Philippines presenting itself as the successor to the Sultanate of Sulu. The Philippines maintains that the Sultanate's sovereignty over the territory wasn't abolished, insisting that North Borneo was merely leased to the North Borneo Chartered Company. However, Malaysia sees this dispute as a non-issue. They interpret the 1878 agreement as a cession, asserting that the residents of Sabah exercised their right to self-determination when they chose to join the Malaysian Federation in 1963. During British administration of North Borneo, the British government continued annual payments to the Sultan and his heirs, clearly marked as cession money in the receipts. This continued up until 1963. In that pivotal year, during a meeting of Mafalendo, a sub-regional association in Southeast Asia involving Malaysia, the Philippines, and Indonesia, the heirs of the Sultanate of Sulu requested payments from the Philippine government to the Malaysian federal state. Kuala Lumpur agreed, and the Malaysian government paid an amount they considered a cession. Meanwhile, the Sultanate of Sulu viewed this payment as rent. However, this annual payment was halted after a tense Milan standoff. The historical complexities and differing interpretations of these payments add layers of intrigue to the ongoing territorial dispute, with both sides standing firm in their positions. Former Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. firmly stated that the Philippines will not relinquish its territorial claim over Sabah, even in the face of enticing financial offers. Locsin revealed that substantial sums of money have been offered multiple times in the past to persuade the Philippines to drop its claim over Sabah, historically known as North Borneo. Amidst this backdrop, Malaysian Foreign Minister Dato Seri Utama Muhammad Hassan is set to meet with Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo to discuss the state of Philippines-Malaysia relations, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs, DFA. This visit marks Hassan's first official trip since he assumed the role of Malaysian Foreign Minister in December 2023. Manalo and Hassan are also expected to exchange views on regional and international developments during this inaugural visit. Both nations are coordinating efforts to convene the 8th Bilateral Joint Commission meeting, a significant event that hasn't occurred in Manila for over a decade. Manalo has extended an invitation to his Malaysian counterpart for an official visit. He emphasized the importance of maintaining the momentum of high-level exchanges between the two countries in 2023. The DFA announced on Friday that Hasan will soon arrive in the Philippines, with the Malaysian embassy in Manila highlighting that the trip aims to promote programs enhancing bilateral cooperation. As the narrative unfolds, the resolution of this age-old conflict will significantly impact the region's geopolitical landscape, with the world watching closely. The Philippines has submitted a proposal aimed at fostering trust and promoting international cooperation to peacefully resolve maritime boundary issues. They clarified that their submission was made without affecting similar claims in the region by Vietnam and Malaysia, which have also filed overlapping claims before the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf concerning the West Palawan region. The Philippines expressed its willingness to engage in discussions with neighboring states to delimit maritime boundaries. They requested that the Commission review their submission on the West Palawan region without prejudicing the delimitation issues with nearby coastal states. Vietnam, on its part, has shown readiness to discuss overlapping claims in the South China Sea with the Philippines. Reaffirming its sovereignty over the Hoang Sa and Truong Sa archipelagos, known internationally as the Paracel and Spratly Islands, Vietnamese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Pham Thu Hang emphasized this stance in a government statement. Hang's comments underscore Vietnam's firm claims, yet the Philippines remains open to talks. The Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs highlighted Manila's readiness to collaborate with Vietnam on finding a mutually beneficial solution to the South China Sea disputes, adhering to international law, particularly the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The Philippines also welcomed Vietnam's acknowledgement of their June 14 submission to the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, which seeks to assert the Philippines' entitlement to an extended continental shelf in the West Palawan region of the South China Sea. On June 20, in response to Manila's submission, Hanoi did not lodge a direct protest. Instead, Vietnam stated that while coastal states have the right to determine their outer continental shelf boundaries, they must respect the legal rights and interests of other relevant coastal nations. A spokesperson for Vietnam stated that the country is ready to engage in talks with the Philippines to find a mutually beneficial solution. Meanwhile, China has outright rejected the Philippines' submission, claiming it infringes on China's sovereign rights and violates international law. Beijing asserts historic rights over most of the South China Sea, despite a 2016 arbitral tribunal ruling under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, that dismissed these claims. The Philippines' submission, reinforcing this tribunal's decision, has notably excluded China from any negotiations on the continental shelf. Recently, China and the Philippines have been locked in tense standoffs over several reefs within Philippine waters in the South China Sea that both nations claim. Malaysia, too, has firmly rejected the Philippines' submission, arguing that the Philippine continental margin projection overlaps with Malaysia's state of Sabah. Malaysia maintains that this disregards its undeniable sovereignty over Sabah, as stated by its permanent mission to the United Nations. Nguyen Hong Thao, a professor of international law at the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, highlighted Manila's readiness to discuss maritime boundary delimitation with relevant countries. Vietnam and the Philippines have historically maintained solidarity and cooperation for their mutual benefit. However, the timeline for these consultations remains unclear. Last month, the Philippines requested the UN body to officially recognize its extensive undersea continental shelf in the South China Sea, granting it exclusive rights to explore and exploit resources. Through its mission to the UN in New York, the Philippine government submitted detailed information to the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf after over a decade and a half of scientific research. The Department of Foreign Affairs, DFA, explained that under Article 76 of UNCLOS, coastal states like the Philippines are entitled to establish the outer limits of their continental shelf. This shelf includes the seabed and subsoil of submarine areas extending beyond 200 nautical miles, but not exceeding 350 nautical miles from the baselines from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. The National Mapping and Resource Information Agency, spearheading the Extended Continental Shelf Technical Working Group, devoted over 15 years to prepare this crucial submission. The Department of Foreign Affairs, DFA, emphasized its importance in securing the Philippines' sovereign rights and maritime jurisdictions in the West Philippine Sea. They highlighted that the 2016 South China Sea Arbitration Award validated the Philippines' maritime entitlements while rejecting claims that surpassed the geographic and substantive limits defined by UNCLOS. Philippine Permanent Representative to the UN, Antonio Lagdamio, expressed that this move can revitalize efforts among states to show their commitment to UNCLOS processes in determining maritime entitlements and promoting a rules-based international order. Philippines data demonstrated that the West Palawan region is a natural extension of its land territory, reaching beyond 200 nautical miles from the baselines. This supports their entitlement to a continental shelf beyond this distance in the West Palawan region, as detailed in their 30-page executive summary submitted to the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf on June 14. Under UNCLOS, a country's continental shelf includes the seabed and subsoil, extending beyond its territorial sea through the natural prolongation of its land territory to the outer edge of the continental margin, or up to 200 nautical miles from the baselines. However, this extension should not exceed 350 nautical miles from the baseline. The CLCS plans to review the Philippines submission in a session between January and March next year. An extended continental shelf allows a coastal state exclusive rights to explore and exploit natural resources up to 350 nautical miles from its shore. Malaysia, which claims 10 maritime features in the southern Spratly Islands, appears to have dropped its claim to an 11th feature, Louisa Reef. Of the 10 features it still claims, Malaysia controls 7. Vietnam and China also lay claim to all these features, while the Philippines claims only some. Malaysia's claims to certain maritime features in the South China Sea are based on a 1966 law, a 1979 map, and a 2009 joint submission with Vietnam to the CLCS. Malaysia has effectively controlled the features where it has a presence, and officials occasionally assert rights to certain maritime features within its exclusive economic zone, though this claim is inconsistently referenced. While several features claimed by Malaysia could generate territorial waters of their own, Malaysia has only claimed a 12 nautical mile territorial sea around 2 features, Swallow Reef, which it controls, and Amboina Cay, controlled by Vietnam. Swallow Reef, the standout island among Malaysia's controlled claims, was occupied in 1983, with other features gradually taken over during the 1980s. The status of Malaysia's claim to Louisa Reef, which was disputed with Brunei until 2009, remains murky. In a pivotal 2009 joint press statement, Malaysia and Brunei announced that they had reached an agreement through an exchange of letters on delimiting maritime boundaries and setting the stage for the final demarcation of their land boundary. Brunei later asserted in its preliminary submission to the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf that this exchange of letters had delimited its territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, and continental shelf, implicitly claiming Louisa Reef. This suggests that Malaysia's claim may have lapsed, although this hasn't been definitively confirmed. Adding to the complexity, China claims 2 submerged systems, James Shoal and the Continental Shelf region. Unlike other areas in the South China Sea, the coast off the eastern Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak is particularly rich in oil and natural gas, which are crucial revenue sources for the Malaysian government. Of the estimated 11.2 billion barrels of crude oil reserves in the South China Sea, the U.S. Energy Information Administration reports that 5 billion barrels are in uncontested Malaysian waters. Securing rights to offshore oil and gas was a significant achievement of the 2009 exchange of letters between Brunei and Malaysia, which settled their maritime disputes. The Luconia Shoals, claimed by China, host production facilities believed to contain substantial hydrocarbon resources. Some Malaysian production sites lie within China's 9-dash line, but disrupting these facilities might not align with China's interests, especially considering the 25-year liquefied natural gas supply agreement signed between the two countries in 2006. This dynamic situation underscores the importance of these resources and the ongoing geopolitical maneuvers in the region. The intertwined claims and agreements reflect a complex tapestry of national interests and international diplomacy, with each nation striving to protect and assert its rights in one of the world's most strategically significant and resource-rich regions.